makes my tractor sexy. It really turns her on.
Good morning guys. I love that tractor so much, it's so cool. Today is day number 1 of working on the rain roof. So I only have about 45 minutes until some people arrive here, so I'm gonna try to get as much done before they arrive, and then I'll probably do some work afterwards. But I just wanted to quickly talk about what is the purpose of the rain roof and why I'm building it the way that I'm gonna be building it. When I've talked about the rain roof in previous videos, a lot of people are curious as to why I'm not raising it up off the ground. So why is it not gonna be, 8 feet or 10 feet off the ground, and then it could also serve as an area where you could, park the tractor or park vehicles underneath. Get my awesome hat on. So when we picked out the spot for the tiny house, something that I was also looking for is an area where I would be able to build this rain roof. And the rain roof that we're gonna be building is gonna be a minimum of 2,500 square feet. So if you take into account the square footage of the tiny house, the awning, and the shed, that's only really about 600 square feet of roof catchment area. And for the amount of water that we need to collect when we do get rain, so we only get about 11 or 12 inches of rain per year. And I think the national average is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30 inches of rain per year. If you live in the Pacific Northwest, I believe you get over 100 inches of rain per year. So we are very limited with the amount of rain that actually does fall here. So in order to collect the amount of water that we definitely need a dedicated roof that's just for collecting rainwater, just because we don't have enough square footage otherwise. So I've had to do a number of calculations to figure out how much square footage of roof that we're gonna need, as well as how much storage capacity that we're gonna need in the form of tanks. So right now we have 10,000 gallons in those poly tanks, and then that big metal culvert that you've probably seen in a number of videos, that's gonna be collecting water off the awning and off the tiny house. And I believe the size of that is 1,600 or 1,700 gallons. So that means that we have approximately 11,600 gallons worth of storage capacity. So living in a desert climate like this, where we only get 11 or 12 inches of rain per year, I would say that about 10,000 gallons is the minimum amount of storage that you would need in order to live, I would say, a comfortable life. There are people in this area that do rainwater harvesting, and they only have about 6,000 gallons worth of storage. And kudos to them for living on such a small water budget. Hannah and I really want to focus on gardening, and gardening certainly takes up a good amount of water. So what we've had to do is actually create like a water budget and figure out how much water that we're going to be using on average per day, and then extrapolate that over the year. So I don't want to get into too much of the calculations, but we've basically created a water budget. And based on the amount of water that I believe that we're going to need throughout the year, at least 10,000 gallons of storage capacity, and we'll need at least 3,000 square feet of roof catchment area. Now, a lot of people have been like, why don't you build the roof up? When you build the roof up, the price, it goes up significantly. So think about all the work that went into setting the 25 fence posts. In order to do a raised structure like that, I don't know exactly how many posts that I would need, but it would be a substantial number, maybe between 50 to 100 posts in order for a 3,000 square foot roof to sit on. So the idea of the rain roof was to make it very low tech and to make it as inexpensive as possible. So the materials that I'm using are some of the cheapest materials that you can get. Cinder blocks, very inexpensive. 2x4s in an 8-foot length, inexpensive. 8-foot pieces of galvanized metal roofing, inexpensive. Now there are other low-cost options for roofing. The metal galvanized roofing is just slightly under $1 per square foot, but since the metal roof is nice and smooth, you're gonna capture the most amount of water, and it's gonna be of the highest quality as well. So the location of the roof is about 150 feet uphill from basically where the water tanks are. So the location of it is almost in the back corner of our property, because the back corner of our property is basically the highest point, and then it slopes down towards the front corner. So the position of it would just make it very awkward to park vehicles under, because it's not really close to where everything else is going to be. Where we're going to be doing other future buildings is going to be downhill, like much further downhill. So in order to raise it up and to park stuff under it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I know many of you have suggested that I raise it up. It just does not make logistical sense in terms of where it is, and it doesn't make financial sense as well. So the keys to the roof is to keep it as low cost as possible for getting the most amount of catchment area. So if any of you still feel very strongly that I should raise it up, you can certainly donate a few $1,000s and volunteer a week of your time out here, and then we could raise it up, and then you're gonna be happy. But for me, I'm trying to make this as easy as possible for myself. It's gonna be on the ground. A few of you also suggested that we should build it over where the tanks are. You have to understand that this roof is huge. This roof is gonna be bigger, much bigger than even some very large homes. 3,000 square feet. So you have to think it's gonna be probably between 60 to 70 feet wide by 40 to 50, even 60 feet going up the hill. So it's huge, and it would look really, really weird if we built it over the tanks or built it over a portion of our fenced-in area. It would just look so freaking weird. If that's something that you guys want to do with your property, then by all means go for it. I picked out this spot because it's already pretty well mostly cleared out. And I was looking for a spot where it'd be easy to build, I wouldn't have to do too much work, and it was relatively close to where the tanks are gonna be. And what's really nice about this area is that we're sitting about 4 or 5 feet above grade from where the tanks are. So that's why we bury the tanks 4 feet down. So the tanks are 8 feet tall. I buried them 4 feet below grade, so the top of the tanks are 4 feet above grade, and where I'm standing right now is about 4 feet above the top of the tanks. And we're gonna be building the roof up off the ground, either 1 or 2 cinder blocks high. So this creates a very elegant and simple solution to filling up those tanks in a way that is gonna be as inexpensive as possible. So I hope that reasoning makes sense and I don't come across as too much of a dick. But you have to understand from my standpoint, I received the same comment about certain things like 20 or 30 times. It's gonna be fine where it is. I've planned it all out. It's gonna be awesome. So where I'm standing right about now is approximately where the front corner of it's gonna be. So it's going to extend that way and then that way above, back behind the camera there. And then you can maybe see behind me, you can see the tanks down there. And it might not seem like it, but we are on a pretty significant grade. Not like super significant, but at least 2 or 3%. So over the length of 150 feet, you're gonna be gaining at least 4 feet of elevation difference. So that's why I picked this spot, and that's why those tanks are buried below grade, so that I wouldn't have to raise the roof up. Raising the roof! So I wouldn't have to raise the roof that far off the ground. So this can be very low tech, very simple, and as inexpensive as we can possibly make it. So you can see here, just by removing that one tree, it totally opens up this area. So I can build pretty far that way, and then far that way as well. And if I need to cut those trees or trim them back a bit, then I can do that as well. so that I can add on more roof in the future if we ever need to. And that's another reason why I've picked this spot, is because it does allow room for expansion. So if we want to upgrade it to maybe 3,500 square feet, we could do that. So like I said earlier, the three main building components of this: 8-foot pieces of galvanized roofing, 8-foot pieces of 2x4s, and then we have a couple skidfuls of cinder blocks. So where we're located, it does actually get pretty, it can get quite windy out here. We can get, during a storm, we can get gusts up to 40, 50 miles per hour. So you really have to take that into consideration when you're building a structure like this, because it could literally start acting like a sail and the whole roof could just like take flight. So we don't want the roof to take flight. So I'm gonna be using a number of ground anchors on the perimeter of the roof and maybe some within the middle of it to hold the roof on the ground so that when I wake up one morning after a storm, half of the roof isn't like flying somewhere else. I don't want that to happen. So first thing that I'm gonna do, I don't have a lot of time to work on it this morning, maybe only about another half an hour or so. But I do wanna make sure, I got a laser level so I can get a more precise measurement of the exact grade difference from here down towards the tanks. Because to measure it initially, what I did was I actually just use a line level and some string, but I want something that's gonna be a little bit more precise, just so that I know exactly where the lowest point of the roof can be, like where the gutter is gonna be. Because the gutter of the roof, basically the inlet point, has to be higher than the top of the tanks. Because if it isn't, then gravity is not gonna be working in our favor, and the water will not flow down the hill and up into the tanks. That'd be totally catastrophic if it didn't. I could always fix it just by adding more cinder blocks just to build it up higher, but let's just double check just to make sure.